My Buddhist name is Saddhaloka. I'm part of the community at Adhisthana, a Triratna centre in the Herefordshire countryside in England. There's usually lots of people coming through here, visiting on retreat, for meetings, but at the moment we're cut off from the outside world, closed to the outside world in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. So I'm giving this short series of 10-minute talks on the Buddha as an offering in these strange and extraordinary times. There's a devotional verse we often recite in Triratna in ceremonies as a way of just remembering what is most important and most valued, what has the deepest meaning in our lives. So we recite, we reverence the Buddha. The Buddha was born as we are born. What the Buddha overcame, we too can overcome. What the Buddha attained, we too can attain. The Buddha. So I'm going to begin with the story of Anathapindika. He was a wealthy banker from Savatthi, one of the great cities of ancient India, and he was visiting his brother-in-law in another of the great cities, Rajgaha. And usually when he visited his brother-in-law, he'd be welcomed and made a real fuss of. But this time his brother-in-law just seemed preoccupied. He was busy preparing for a great meal, but he didn't seem to have much time for Anathapindika. So Anathapindika says, "What's going on? What's happening? Is the king coming for a meal? Is one of your daughters getting married?" And the brother-in-law replies, No, the Buddha is coming for a meal with the disciples travelling with him tomorrow. And on it, Anathapindika, just hearing that word, that name, Buddha, it just set up a tremendous resonance in his being. Did you say Buddha? Yes, the Buddha. Did you say Buddha? That's right, the Buddha. The Buddha. Can I meet him? I must see him. No, you'll have to wait till tomorrow. Look, he's coming for a meal. He's out of the city in the park with his disciples now. You'll have to wait till tomorrow. Anathapindika went to bed that night, but he couldn't sleep. Tomorrow. He was just waiting for tomorrow. And he woke up several times in the night. Is it morning yet? I want to meet the Buddha, but it was still night. But then eventually he thought he saw a glimmer of dawn light in the sky. He got up, he went out of the house, set off out the city. It was actually still the middle of the night. But he managed to find his way to the park where the Buddha was staying with his disciples. And he saw the Buddha. He saw the Buddha walking up and down, meditating. He went over to him. They exchanged greetings and sat and talked. They talked together for a long time. And Anathapindika became one of the Buddha's most generous and devoted lay disciples. So just hearing the word Buddha set up this tremendous resonance in Anathapindika. So what can we say about the Buddha? The Buddha to be lived in northeast India probably about 400 years before the Common Era. He was a son of an aristocrat, maybe the elected king of the Shakyan people. He lived at a time of great prosperity and culture, but also a time of great change and insecurity. Armies were on the move. Small kingdoms and republics were being absorbed by the greater kingdoms. The future was uncertain. And out of this mixture of prosperity and uncertainty came a time also of great spiritual ferment and questioning. What was this life all about? There was the tradition of the Vedas, the tradition of the ancient myths, rituals, ceremonies passed on by the Brahmins. But there was also another very vivid, alive spiritual tradition of homeless wanderers, people who'd given up everything and went off, just begging their food, sleeping rough, seeking out truth and meaning. So as this young prince aristocrat grew into manhood, the question of life and the question of the meaning of life really confronted him strongly. He saw how fleeting youth was. He saw sickness was always there. He saw old age. He saw death. He saw suffering. And he was asking, what is the point of it? What's the meaning of it all, this life where we're caught up in our desires, our fears, all the busyness, all the preoccupations of a life that end inevitably in death. And for him, this became not just a sort of somewhat self-indulgent existential angst. You know how we can sometimes pump up a bit of existential angst when we want to feel a bit poetic or spiritual. It wasn't like that for him. It was an all-consuming urge, necessity to get to the heart of the matter, to make sense of this fleeting human life. So eventually he left his wealth, family, security, and went forth. He joined the company of the homeless wanderers, the Shramana's, begging food, sleeping rough, devoted completely to this search for the deepest meaning in life. He found his way to the most famous teachers of the day. He met with them, spoke with them, put into practice what they had to teach, and very quickly realised their teachings. He enjoyed expansive states of consciousness, states of bliss, brightness, joy. But when he came out of the meditation, the questions of old age, sickness, death, suffering, they were still there. They hadn't gone away. So what next? If this wasn't working, where to go? So now he took up the path of asceticism, the idea that if one can crush down the body, crush down one's desires, the spirit will fly free. So he pushed and pushed. He ate less and less. He ignored hunger, pain, insect bites, fear. He just pushed and pushed and pushed over several years, gaining a great reputation for his austerities. But eventually he came to the point where he was so weak, so depleted, he realised that if he pushed any further, he'd soon be dead. And despite his great will power and determination, if he pushed any further, it would all be over, and he'd be no closer to his goal. So as soon as he clearly saw this, he stopped. He gave up the path of asceticism and took good food, began to build up his strength again. And at this point he was abandoned in disgust by 5 close followers who thought he'd betrayed them, that he'd returned to a life of luxury after eating a bowl of milk rice. But what next? Where now? So there arose in his mind now a memory from his boyhood. It was spring. He was sitting underneath a rose apple tree. And there was this spontaneous experience of peace, bliss, happiness that just washed over him. And he thought, could this memory hold a key? So now bringing together the momentum established through these years of striving and effort, bringing that together with a profound sense of ease, relaxation, letting go. He began to explore meditation, explore his own mind and being in a new way. New vistas of mind and being began to open up. Feelings of pleasure and joy flooded through him, but his mind wasn't taken over by them. He saw countless past lives arising before him, life after life after life. He saw universes arising and passing away in dependence on conditions. He saw beings arising and passing away in accord with their actions. He saw into the very heart of existence. He saw how, with minds rooted in craving, hatred, and ignorance, beings were launched again and again into an endless round of birth, sickness, suffering, old age, and death. He saw all this. He saw through it, and his heart was finally set free. There took place what is sometimes described as a profound turning about in the deepest seat of consciousness. He became a Buddha, an enlightened one who knows. He spent the next few weeks absorbing, assimilating the immensity of what had happened. And then gradually, he began to turn his mind again to the world, to other people. But would it be possible to communicate, share with others what he'd found? Yes. Yes, there were some with but little dust on their eyes, who would understand. He thought of the teachers he'd first trained under, but they had died. Then he thought of those 5 followers who'd left him in disgust when he started to take nourishing food again. They were good, sincere men. They would understand. So he set out to walk to Varanasi, to the deer park at Sarnath, where they were staying. And we'll be taking up the story in the next talk.